Hello again, and what is hip? And welcome to my PSP advertisement slash buying guide for 2023. And I really wanted to focus on all things PSP and why I think you should really focus on collecting for this system this year. And the games I have in front of me are just a couple of the reasons as to why I think the system is worth your time and your money. So we're just going to get right into it, and I'm going to talk about a couple of the revisions of this system for those of you who are not as familiar with the console. So over the course of its lifespan, Sony released many different revisions of this system. I'm going to be focusing on the main three, and that's the PSP 1000, 2000, and 3000 series. So the first one is the PSP 1000. It is the cheapest PlayStation Portable, and it was the one that really started it all. It was the first one to be released, and it's also the worst. And I really think you should avoid the PSP 1000 at all costs. It has the worst screen. It has the least amount of RAM. It has 32 megabytes of RAM, while the other two revisions that I mentioned have 64. And it also does not have video output. And it's the only one to not have video output of those three revisions. However, the build quality, from my experience, has been superior. They're much thicker than the 2 and 3000, and they're really built like a tank. And the UMD tray at the back is also much sturdier than the ones to follow. So it has that going for it. If your main focus is to be playing PSP games and you're only going to get one PSP console, by all means, don't get the 1000. You're going to want to get either the 2 or 3000, but it is the one that started it all. So the next one is the PSP 2000. It's kind of the Goldilocks of the three systems. It came out after the 1000, and it improved on the screen quality by a significant margin. It doubled the RAM to 64 megabytes, and it introduced video output, which was super cool because you could plug in a special cable and it would output the video from your PSP to your television, and that was so incredibly cool, and it's something I still do to this day. It's a really cool thing to do, and in many ways it's almost like a precursor to the Nintendo Switch, just a little more clunky. So it's priced more than the 1000, but it's less than the 3000 series. I think you can get them for just under $100. And I personally would avoid the 2000 unless you get a really killer deal on the system. But I would avoid it, and I would just shoot for the best because it's not that much more expensive, and that would be the PSP 3000. And this is the PSP 3000 right here. It shares many of the same specifications as the PSP 2000. They're very similar in size. They both have video output. However, this one has a significantly better screen than the 2000 series. It's, I believe the contrast is about 5 times more than the 2000. Also, the color gamut is significantly increased as well, meaning that it can display a lot more colors. And it's just a really, really sleek system, and I think it holds up to this day. I mean, I think that PSP logo on the back with the silver ring, the thin silver ring, is just so sleek. And it's the best of the three. It's also the most expensive of the three. I see them going for a little over $100. Usually not too much more. Sometimes you can find them for under $100 if you're lucky. But this is by far the best PSP system, and I think it's going to be the one that you enjoy the most. So I would just shoot straight for the 3000 if you have the ability. The 2000 is also a very capable system as well. I will say that the 3000 is known for having more visible scan lines than the 2000, but that has not bothered me at all. The 2000 is known to have some ghosting issues, which this system greatly reduced. So I wouldn't let the screen bother you, or that small aspect of the screen bother you, and I would still get the 3000. So that's it for the main three revisions. And now I want to talk about the meats and potatoes of this, and that is, why should I collect for the PlayStation Portable in 2023? Well, the PSP, I think, is long overdue for a crazy price hike that we've been seeing in almost every other retro video game console and retro video games since basically just before the pandemic. The PSP has been steadily going up in price, but it's still very, very cheap in comparison to a lot of the other systems that were out during that time, and the price hike has been significantly less. Before the pandemic, you used to find PlayStation Portable games for a dime a dozen. But then the pandemic hit, and it started to increase, and I've noticed over the past 4 months or so, the price increases are starting to kind of increase more and more, and it's getting worrying because I really do see the system becoming very expensive in the future, because this system is basically an affordable PlayStation 1. And what I mean by that is, well, it was advertised as having the power of the PlayStation 2, but it really didn't. But a lot of PlayStation 1 games were ported over to the PlayStation Portable. And usually these PlayStation 1 counterparts are very, very expensive. But when they were released on the PlayStation Portable, most of the time they refined them and they became the definitive editions of these PlayStation 1 classics, while oftentimes still kind of maintaining the same graphics style as the PlayStation 1 counterparts at a significantly reduced cost. And to this day, those prices are still significantly less than the PlayStation 1. And I'm going to get into a couple of those right here. So one of the first ones here is Final Fantasy Tactics, and for those of you who have not played this game, it is a wonderful tactical RPG. And I know with the recent release of Fire Emblem Engage, the whole tactical RPG is kind of starting to get into the mainstream, which is really, really wonderful. And this game right here, you can get this for $20, around $20 or so. And at least to my knowledge, since the PSP released of this game, it has not been re-released on any other system, maybe other than mobile, but I don't really count that. So it was originally released on the PlayStation 1, and you can find the PlayStation 1 version for around $30, $35. But this game drastically improved the writing. It added a bunch of story, and it also did some quality of life balancing to the gameplay, which really, really improved really everything about that game. And it's also $10 to $15 less. Granted, there are a couple of frame rate issues that appeared in this version, but the other improvements far outweigh a couple of frame rate issues here and there. But it's a really, really wonderful game, and with the PSP 2000 and 3000, you can output it on your television. So it's like you're playing the original PlayStation 1 classic, but it's the better PSP version. So the next game that was ported to the PSP and ultimately approved upon was Final Fantasy IV: The Complete Collection. And you may be wondering why I'm deciding to highlight this, since Final Fantasy IV has been released on so many other systems, and you would be correct about that. But this version was the very first to kind of receive a full pixel remastering. And in my opinion, of the pixel remasters, I think this is the best. I know they have a mobile version of Final Fantasy IV with a kind of pixel remaster, but I think it looks quite hideous in my opinion. But I think they did really well on this one, and they included a bunch of really nice cutscenes, and I think this is a great version for those of you who maybe don't like the 3D art style of the DS version and the Steam version, but still kind of want some of the improvements that they put into those games. So I think this game is a nice Goldilocks kind of version where you get that 2D art style and you get a lot of quality of life improvements from the newer kind of DS games. But what makes this so special is this includes Final Fantasy IV: The After Years. And for those of you that don't know, Final Fantasy IV: The After Years was an episodic series of games first released, I believe, on the Wii Virtual Console, and I remember buying the first episode. And for the longest time, that was the only place that you could get those games until they came out with the full collection on PSP. And to this day, this is the only place that you can physically get Final Fantasy IV: The After Years collection. Is it known as the best Final Fantasy game? Absolutely not. But I still think it's pretty good, and it's a sequel, a direct sequel to Final Fantasy IV, one of, in my opinion, the best RPGs of all time. And you can get this collection for about $40 or so, and it comes with full manual, it comes with these cool little art cards, and it's just really cool. And the PSP was known for doing that. They have these really nice manuals, and a lot of times they included some little extra goodies in there, especially the NIS games. And it's really cool. So that's Final Fantasy IV: The Complete Collection. So the next couple of games here are the ones that really inspired me to make this video, and are some of the reasons really why I think you gotta collect for this system this year before the prices get even crazier. And that's Shin Megami Tensei Persona 1 and Shin Megami Tensei Persona 2 Innocent Sin. Now, both of these were released on the PlayStation 1. Innocent Sin was not released in America, it was released in Japan, but the original Persona 1, also known as Persona Revelations in America, was released on the PlayStation 1 in America, and at least the NTSC versions, the United States versions of these games, go for $400 easily, making it completely unattainable for the majority of us, including myself. And it's also the inferior version of the game by far. Originally, there's a point in the story in the Japanese release where it splits off into two different paths, and that's not a spoiler. It's advertised on the box. And there's the Ice Queen path, and there's another path. In America, the Ice Queen path was completely cut out of the story, leaving only one path. And they changed a lot of characters' names and even races to appeal to a more American market. And really just the worst version of Persona 1 by far. So it wasn't until the PSP came out where they decided to redo all this, and they added the Ice Queen quest. They changed the characters' names and races back to their original Japanese versions. And we finally got kind of the true version of Shin Megami Tensei Persona 1 in the States. And this is by far the best version of this game. They went through and did some balancing of some things. They updated the music, the graphics, added some really cool cutscenes, and it's just a really, really great re-release of this game. And this version goes for about 150 to 200 plus with the box, this collector's edition box, which comes with a special CD. So by no means is that cheap, but significantly cheaper than the original version that came out. And if you want to get it without the collector's version box, I think it's about $150 or so, maybe a little less, where it's just the game itself. And I think that's a really great path to go down as well. But I really do see these games, or this game, going up significantly in value. And the next one here is Shin Megami Tensei Persona 2 Innocent Sin. And this is the first time that we ever received this game in the States. It was originally released on the PlayStation 1 in Japan. We got Persona 2 Eternal Punishment in the States on the PlayStation 1. And that's a completely different game. Persona 2 was a two-part game. We got the second part. We did not get the first part, which was Innocent Sin. And they decided to release Innocent Sin on the PlayStation Portable in America fully translated, and it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing. It's the first time we got to play this Persona game. They did similar things that they did with the original Persona on the PlayStation Portable. They redid music and some graphics and some balancing, and really made this the definitive version of Persona 2 Innocent Sin. Unfortunately, Eternal Punishment did not receive this same treatment, so the only way to get that game is on the PlayStation 1, and you're going to be looking at around $400. But Innocent Sin here goes for about the same as Persona 1, around $200 for the collector's box, and then $150, maybe a little less, for just the game itself. So still incredibly expensive. But what makes this really unfortunate is that these two versions of the game you can only get on the PlayStation Portable. They took them down from the PlayStation Vita store, and yeah, you can only get them on the PSP, which really sucks. So hopefully at some point they do some sort of a re-release. But at least for now, and at least for the foreseeable future, I think the PSP versions are going to be the only place where you can really play these games. So these two games right here are just one example of the many amounts of games that were released on this system that are the definitive versions of those games. There was a Castlevania game released on the PSP, I believe it was Castlevania Chronicles X, and that was the first time that we saw Castlevania, I think it was Rondo of Blood or something Rondo, that was released for the first time in the States. It was originally a PC Engine game, and it was remade in full 3D for the PSP, and alongside that was Symphony of the Night that they released on the PSP, and at the time those were the definitive versions of those games, and I still think that's the only place where you can get at least Rondo, Castlevania Rondo, physically still. And there's a lot of games that are still exclusive to the PSP, at least in regards to physical collecting. And then there's also a bunch of other wonderful games that are really lost in time on the system. Like we have the Dexter series, which is a wonderful platformer by Sony that is still only on this system. I don't think it's been re-released. I could be wrong. There might be an HD collection. But then you also got Fat Princess Fistful of Cake, which is a wonderful kind of strategy kind of game where you have two teams, red and blue, and you have to capture the other person's princess, but the only way to prevent them from doing that is to feed your princess cake to make them fatter and heavier, so it requires more effort from the other team to capture them and move them to their side of the map. Like, such a unique, funny, crazy idea that is really only on the PSP. And the PSP had so many of those kind of unique, fun games, and there's still, a lot of them are still very cheap. Again, this system has not seen the crazy price hike that we've seen recently in like the GameCube or the DS or even the 3DS, but it's starting. The prices are creeping up, and especially the past 4 or 5 months, I've really started to see them creep up, and I think 2023 is going to be the year where we see a pretty big price hike on a lot of these games, especially games that are locked on the system, like the Shin Megami Tensei Persona series. And then you also have games like Breath of Fire 3 that was released on the PSP as a remake of sorts, only in PAL categories, but that's the only place where you can play that game. And another benefit is that it's region free. This system is completely region free. For games, you can also get little UMD movies that have movies on them, but those are not region free. So you can't play that on any PSP system. You have to get it from the region of the UMD. But yeah, it's a great system, and it deserves the price hike. So get it before the price hike happens. And I really think that this year is going to be the year we see a crazy price increase on a lot of these games, because it really is the kind of the PS1 lovers' dream here. It's the definitive PS1 in many ways. So thanks so much for watching, you guys. I know this was kind of just a little rambly video here, but I really wanted to talk about the PSP and why I love it so much and why I am going to start collecting this system more in 2023. I know the PS Vita gets a lot of the attention, which it definitely deserves, but I think the PSP deserves as much attention as the PS Vita has been getting. But in many ways, that's also very good for us PSP collectors, because it still kind of leaves these prices in the more attainable category, at least for now. But did you grow up with the PSP? Have you just started collecting the PSP? Do you want to collect the PSP? Let me know in the comments. I would love to talk about our memories and what we love about this system. So thank you guys so much for watching. Have a good one.